Hello? Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Fast Mayday, what's your location? Get the hell out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, baby. Water in that 2.5-inch line. 48 inch water in a 2.5-inch line. The rope. 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear.
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we talk about firefighter and paramedic line of duty deaths to learn from these tragic events and potentially prevent them from happening in the future. I am Paul, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts Dirk and Denis. Before we get into the chit-chat, I wanted to give a shout-out to a few fans to thank you for your feedback on the show. Mariel F. and Michael R. Thanks a lot for the kind words, and we'll keep working on it. Hello, Dirk and Denis. How's it going?
Hello.
What's happening? What's new? What you been doing?
Let's go H before beauty.
Oh, nice.
I think that was aimed at me.
I think so, and you're older than me, so a lot.
Yeah, just been scowling out the window. The temperature has dropped and the snow is flying. And
nice.
Me and my buddies, maybe we're stupid or just, hopelessly romantic, but we're hoping to get at least one more motorcycle ride in before the end of the year. But, when you're getting a high of 3 or 4, and I was heading down to the store this afternoon, and I seen a motorcycle coming at me on a Harley. It was 4 degrees, and he went whizzing by me, and I looked at him and says, "Okay, now that's cold. I know that's cold."
I think it's 7 here today. And sunny.
And, yeah, it's nice when the sun shines, but you can't even count on that. So, yeah, besides cussing out the weather and trying to work behind the scenes to try to get the fire protection legislation in Nova Scotia amended to make more sense, bring it into the 21st century. So, working with little initiatives here and there on that. So there's a lot of things going on, and there's never enough time in the day. Like I've said before, I don't know how I ever managed when I was working full time.
Yeah. The Rural Municipalities Association of Alberta passed a resolution to pursue the government for better planning, response, etc., for wildland fires that are not in what's called in Alberta the green zone. So they're not the responsibility of the province, or the responsibility of the municipalities. And so they've actually put forward a resolution to the province. So they're going to start to make some better plans and stuff. I told them you got to follow like California OES or something. You got to get some predisposition of apparatus and equipment and training, and so we'll see where that goes. I see BC, I think, did something similar recently with their new emergency planning legislation. So maybe that'll come down east one day.
Yeah, here planning is a massive issue. I mean, like in the municipality where I live, they haven't updated their emergency plan since 2017.
Yeah, ouch.
Even though their local legislation says they must review it and update it annually.
Right.
So, and
change the phone numbers.
And like seriously, and it showed.
Yeah.
This summer it showed.
We don't want to trigger you or anything.
And people died.
Hopefully it can get improved. You've been doing any social media, travel, watching movies, reading books?
Me?
Yeah.
Who has time for that stuff?
Oh, okay. All right.
He doesn't have time. He just said that.
I know. How about you, Dirk? What have you been doing? Work.
I went to the Pacific Northwest Fire Conference on Bainbridge Island, which is right across the bay from Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
I got to see Seattle in the far distance, a few of the high rises on the way back. Beautiful place. The whole island it has very Vancouver Island feeling to it. So pretty cool. Conference was amazing. 3 days. Unfortunately, all classroom stuff, all lectures, but it was good. It was nice to meet some of these guys that I've been listening to on podcasts and stuff like that, and watching videos, and just meeting people from all over the place. A lot of Tacoma firefighters down there too. That's
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool. They were saying Tacoma FD is actually a documentary. I didn't know that.
Oh, okay.
That show. I don't know if you guys ever watched it.
No.
It's a certified comedy, unlike all the other 911 shows.
Okay.
That are
It's
also
really-
comedies, just not certified.
Well, yeah, they are, but they're not admittedly comedies, and that's why they're saying that Tacoma FD is actually a documentary. It's pretty funny. No, it was overall fantastic. Lots of information, all kinds of presentation, like search, fire attack, building construction. Was it Jerry Johnson? I think it's Jerry Johnson from Vancouver. No, James Johnson. That's it. James Johnson was there, so I met him for the first time there. And Justin McWilliams did awesome presentation on search, and that's not a death wish. It's just really cool stuff. Talked about the firefighter rescue survey a lot, all the numbers and what we can do with them, and selling our wins and not just our losses, because that's what most administrations do, right? We had, I don't know, X amount of fire fatalities, fire losses, and instead of going the negative, well, why don't we just sell our wins? How many people we actually saved, rescued?
Oh, it's kind of like
rescued
the
all of them.
grabs, like that grabs
Yes,
podcast
exactly.
where
Yeah,
they
Ben
advertise
Schultz,
successful
is one of
rescues.
them
Yeah.
involved. Brian Brush and all these guys. So I think we had Ben Schultz doing a presentation on that, and also just tweaking our brains on the alpinist approach to firefighting instead of the day long adventure approach. Like, you take everything you need just in case,
Mm-hmm.
but we're really at a scene for a few hours. Do we really have to carry all this crap with us and just gear? Talking about TPP um, and
Thermal protection ratings.
ratings. Yeah, that there's a difference, right? And what you want, what you need. We have more and more guys dropping like flies in hot weather, just standing outside, not even fighting fires, because we are wearing gear that's supposed to protect us for that once in a lifetime fire. And now we're teaching everybody to use copious amounts of water to cool everything. So do we really need that super protective gear? But it's hard to go back, right? Because it's all, it's safety. We
Take the
approach
safety
the
away. Yeah.
industry to get better with our mask and our gear and our flash hood, but then we also encapsulating us more and more and more for that one time being in a fire. So it was an interesting discussion about that. So that was cool. Yeah, just
Uh,
really cool conference. I'm looking forward going next year. They want to expand.
Annual. Yep.
Yeah, they want to expand to 5 days, I think, with hands-on training.
Nice.
So we'll see if that's going to happen. But yeah, presentations were fantastic. Chief Nick Martin from, let's see, Virginia, North Carolina, somewhere. I'm really mixing these guys up. But Nick Martin did an awesome presentation on aggressive command, supporting aggressive firefighting, and just the mindset of how approach and makes everything safer, and training, and that was a big part. And then mental health was also a big part. So yeah, it was all around, was a very well-rounded uh, conference. It was almost 300 firefighters attended.
Nice. What was it called again?
It was the Pacific Northwest Fire Conference,
Okay.
PNW.
Cool.
It was by the Fire Nuggets.
Okay.
Fire
That's
Nuggets is coming from the
podcast.
Pacific Northwest there.
Nice.
Fire Nuggets podcast, and they got a website where we have all the presentations and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It was a lot of fun.
It's interesting comment on celebrate our saves, because that's something that I've been thinking about and doing about for many years, and what brought that to my attention was, you spent $8 million on your fire department budget in a year, and you had $4 million on fire losses, and so counselors would look at you and say, it cost us $8 million to save $4 million. Says, well, let's not bother having a fire department because we'd save $4 million. But of course, that's not recognizing what was saved. What would it have been? So that's why it's important when your fire reports actually identify the value of the exposures. And so if you had a $20 million building and you had a $500,000 fire loss, and by the time all your recovery and your cleaning and everything was done, maybe it's $1 million loss, you saved how many
Yeah,
million,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and what would the outcome have been if you hadn't have been there?
yeah. Phoenix Fire about, it's got to be 20 years ago, maybe longer. Did a study, and it was the impact of not fighting commercial fires. What would it cost? And they had a really good study. I'll try to find a link to it or something and put it in social media. But it showed the community, the business, the economic impact of not fighting commercial fires in the community, and it was staggering.
Yeah,
The numbers that
yeah,
people, but there's no concept because we just
yeah,
do it, right?
yeah,
And then you try to sell. And I had this discussion a couple of days ago actually about 10, 15 years ago, everybody was, well, the fire department, you need to be like a business. You run it like a business. And there's no business in it. It's loss prevention. It's risk management.
yeah,
It's not going to make a profit.
yeah,
It's like the life
It's a cost
insurance.
of doing
yeah,
business. That's right.
yeah.
So yeah,
So,
I remember getting into those debates.
yeah, so you need fire department management and budget managers who can talk the talk, understand all this, and get that message across to the governing authorities.
Hmm.
But it trickles down even further because I've known many fire officers who, they were asked to estimate the loss and the value of the building. They just get all annoyed and frustrated and says, I can't be bothered doing that, whatever. They just throw some number in because they don't really appreciate, because nobody has had that conversation with them so that they do appreciate that that is their bread and butter.
Hmm.
Because without that information, you're really very difficult to sell the value of the service they provide. And
Absolutely.
it's critical right down to the bottom, of the organization to understand that it's all about service and it's all about, recording what you do and gathering information.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
the
and
whole point of this firefighter rescue survey from Brian Brush was also he read through the book America's Burning from the
yep,
70s, right? And compared the numbers with today's fire service. And sure, fires are down because back then they were just skyrocketing. I mean, that's just, the highest they will ever get. But he looked at the fire victims, and the fire victim number didn't go down in the last 50 years, even though we have advancement in internal gear and trucks and all this stuff. And so the question was, why is this? Why don't we save more people, right? And then some of the things are like, well, if you only send two guys on an engine to a fire, yeah, you have a fire department, but they're not going to be able to do much except for exterior water. So um, that was an interesting take. Like I think he wrote his. Is he a doctor now? Thesis. He wrote a thesis on something. He's a chief now, so he's very smart, like you guys. Um,
nice. Suck it up.
nah. Anyhow, that was very interesting, and just to see that the numbers don't go down, right? And then he started this rescue survey, which is freely available online. Everybody can download it, and there's quite a few departments now adopting this as an attachment to the company officer report. Because if you are present at a rescue, then we want to know, was it IDLH, like what kind of a building was it, what structure was it, who else, what was involved, visibility, like all this stuff, so that you actually get data that you can work with, and then base your search patterns on it. And so yeah, that was super
We
interesting.
shouldn't belabor it, I guess, and get on with the episode. But
You can
but
edit all this out.
but no, it's good stuff, and maybe a tailboard talk. I remember fighting here in Lacombe with the county when the city wanted to buy a ladder truck, and the county was dead against it. They didn't even want to sign a grant application to get $100,000 from the province for it because, well, we're in the county, we don't need a ladder truck. And I gave them a couple of examples. I said, okay, so the air conditioning on the roof of your brand new shop that you built to maximum code without sprinklers, so you didn't have to put sprinklers in. And you say, well, yeah, we don't care if you come here or not because it'll just burn. You don't want us to put that out. Right? It's just an air conditioning unit, but you're going to let the building burn, or the bulldozer in the shop catches fire, or the electric, who knows what car they're going to buy. Don't get me going on electric stuff, but anyway. You don't want to put it out. And then we had a big fire, 37 below, machine shed and potato storage barn. And the only thing that saved that that building was the aerial that we brought out, and it was able to stop the fire inside the building. That was because you couldn't get at it. It's a concrete tilt-up building that's 30 feet high, and you really couldn't do a lot with hand lines at 37 below. It just blows my mind that these guys are like, well, we don't need that, right?
Yeah, it's cost benefits, right?
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Excellent discussion. What have I been doing? Oh, I've been doing some exercises, been doing some teaching, been reading some books. I'm reading not those kind of exercises, the emergency exercises, and then I'm reading Russia, the Battle of Tsushima Straits, where the Russian fleet got annihilated by the Japanese in 1905. It's quite an interesting story to think of how far they went with a whole bunch of ships and fought battles and coal and stuff. So that's been pretty interesting. Anyway, this week's incident on November 18th, 2022. So the reason I did this one, it's fairly recent, merely a year ago, at about 15:11 local time. Flight 220 or 2213 of LATAM Airways, which was an Airbus A320 airplane, collided with Rescue 3 at the airport in Lima, Peru. Rescue 3 was a 2012 Rosenbauer Panther 4x4 aircraft rescue firefighting apparatus on the runway during a timed emergency training exercise. The aircraft was carrying 102 passengers and 6 crew. It was at approximately 1,200 meters into its takeoff run, traveling at about 230 or 43 kilometers per hour when the impact occurred. 2 firefighters in the fire engine were killed instantly, and another suffered serious injuries, which he succumbed to 6 months later because of the impact. There were no fatalities on the aircraft, although 22 people were treated in hospital. The pilots and crew performed an extremely effective, difficult recovery maneuver and safe evacuation of the aircraft and passengers. In spite of some additional equipment failures that were not related to the incident, one of the escape slides on the front of the plane did not inflate when the door was opened, and there may have been a failure to activate a system that would have made it inflate, but that's not why it didn't inflate. It actually had a broken or a crimped hose. So these things can happen in emergencies, of course. The fire apparatus was significantly damaged beyond repair, and actually the aircraft was also written off due to the impact and post-fire damage. Okay, I'm going to butcher this now. The location was go ahead, Denis.
Jorge Chavez
International Airport is Lima's main international and domestic airport, located in Cayo, 11 kilometers northwest of Lima. The airport opened in 1960, serves about 5 million passengers per year, although it's through its single terminal. It is one of South America's most modern and busiest airports. Actually, I talked to some friends of mine who've been through there and traveled to South America quite a bit, and they've talked about this airport. The airport's been operated by Lima Airport Partners since 2001 with a 30-year contract, which is 80% owned by Fraport AG of Germany. I didn't know about this Fraport, but they operate a lot of airports around the world, Dirk. Kind of interesting.
Because they are so efficient.
So efficient because they're German. They know how to cross the I's and dot the T's. Okay. A major airport expansion project is underway at the airport since 2018. They're building a second 3,400 meter main runway, 10 kilometers of new taxiways, a new terminal, a new control tower, a new fire station, which is important later. The size of the airport is expanding from 2 million square meters to 9 million square meters, planning to serve up to 30 million passengers annually when completed sometime in 2023. And actually, I believe it was completed and opened in April or August of 2023. And the whole construction thing is a theme in what happened to this, how this incident occurred.
So just for those people who don't understand square meters of buildings, just multiply by 10 to get square feet. So 9 million square meters is 90 million square feet. That's a pretty big building.
It's a big area. Not a building, that's the area.
The
airport footprint. Okay.
So a little bit about the airport emergency services. So the aircraft rescue firefighting services have been, serve the airport on a 24/7, 365 basis. So it's a full-time service. They work 12-hour shifts from 7 till 7. So 0700 to 1900, 1900 0700. And on duty in those following staff, I guess this is actually the entire um, administration, as there's a chief and a coordinator, and then there's 3 general supervisors, 3 rescue supervisors, and 45 aircraft firefighters. So that's their entire staff. And on any one of those operational shifts, there's a general supervisor, who I guess is the overall boss, a rescue supervisor, who's obviously in charge of the operational crews, and then 12 aircraft firefighters, who are broken down as follows. 1 is assigned to coordinate from the control tower. 3 are apparatus operators for the ARFF, which stands for Airport Rescue and Firefighting Vehicles. Those would be those Rosenbauers that Paul had mentioned. And then there were 3 officers on those trucks, and then 5 assigned as crews. Not all of the apparatus were ARFF vehicles. Some of them are other vehicles. So the fleet is Rescue 1 and Rescue 2 are Rosenbauer Panther FL 6x6s. Rescue 3 and Rescue 4 are Rosenbauer Panther FL 4x4s. Heavy Rescue 5 is a Rosenbauer Spartan command post, like a rescue truck. And Rescue 6 and 7 are Nissan Frontier utility service apparatus, basically pickup trucks. At the time of the incident, the aircraft rescue and firefighting services was operating out of an old or existing fire station, and the new fire station had not yet been turned over from the construction contractors for ongoing operations at the airport. This will become important later, because it's actually one of the reasons this incident occurred is because there's going to be a new fire hall.
Well, we'll talk about a little bit of training and experience of the victims involved. So, victim 1 was Rescue 3 engineer, 45 years old, 11 years firefighting experience. Victim number 2, Rescue 3 co-engineer.
Yeah, I don't know
32
why they
years
didn't
old.
define
Yeah,
him
I'm
as
not
an
sure.
officer. Yeah.
Yeah. 30 years old, 6 years firefighting experience. And victim number 3 was a firefighter for 23 years old and 15 months on the job, so barely out of his rookie year. The aircraft, November 18th, 2022, the A320N, operated by the company LATAM Airlines Peru SA, was scheduled to carry out flight LPE 2213 from the Jorge Chávez International Airport. And here's where I'm going to be starting: Juliaca Airport, with an estimated takeoff time at 2:55 p.m. local time. So the crew of the aircraft was 2, a pilot and a first officer. They had a cabin crew of 4, a boss and 3 assistants. I thought they were called flight attendants.
Purser. Yeah.
And 102 passengers, and the takeoff weight of 61,642 kilograms, whatever that is in imperial pounds, but pretty heavy.
30 some tons. Yeah. So it's heavy.
It's an airplane.
It was almost 19,000 pounds or 18,000 pounds under its maximum weight, so it wasn't overloaded. Just to mention that this script we actually translated using Google Translate from Portuguese to English. So I had quite a struggle generating a readable English script from the extremely technical aviation document investigation to a script that we could present on the podcast. So there might be a few glitches here and there. Preceding events and conditions. As we mentioned, the airport has been undergoing a significant expansion with multiple construction projects underway since 2018. Several of these projects were nearing completion, including new runways and the new fire station. For everybody's information, aviation rescue and firefighting is regulated by a couple of organizations, so the FAA, or Federal Aviation Administration in the United States, and the International Civil Aviation Organization, otherwise known as ICAO, for much of the rest of the world. Trivial fact is that ICAO's headquartered is in Montreal. And so it's sort of a Canadian entity, just happens to be there. Has been there for a very long time. Aviation response requirements for ARFF, or aircraft rescue firefighting, they have stringent response time requirements based on the time of notification to reaching the end of the main runways of the airport. They must reach it within 3 minutes. That is pretty quick from time of call to arrival. This has been a big problem in the ARFF apparatus industry for many years, because how do you get an apparatus this large to go that fast and keep it on the road? If you've ever looked at an ARFF apparatus, they're often very large and off-road capable. They can carry up to 6,000 liters of water, plus foam and dry chemicals. They carry enough foam for 2 loads of water, so they can actually be refilled, and then they still have enough foam for another tank load. They have a defined gradability of 50%, so that's climbing a 26.7 degree slope. I've actually done these tests. I got involved in some small airport crash trucks down with Emergency One when I was a product manager for them, and we were building what they call RIVs, rapid intervention vehicles, and so they were basically modified Ford F-550 Super Duty trucks, and we had to do all these tests with them, and it's kind of spectacular to climb these hills and stop and back up, and they have to be able to operate with opposite wheels 10 to 14 inches elevated on blocks and not bend the frame, not damage any components, which is similar to the wildland apparatus test down in the States, or NFPA. They have to have acceleration. This is the tricky one here. Acceleration 0 to 80. So yeah, that's fine. It's only 50 miles an hour or 45. But in less than 25 to 35 seconds, depending on the size of the apparatus. And they must be all-wheel drive. They have a minimum top speed of 113 kilometers per hour, which most of your modern fire apparatus today doesn't do that, even in the cities. That's the high end of their top speed. These have to be able to do it, certified. They have to be stable on a side slope of 30 degrees. And they have to turn within a 46-meter radius at 48 kilometers per hour. I've done this test drive in an F-550, and it is scary. You think you're going to roll the truck over. I can't imagine doing it in one of the big crash trucks. They're very complex machines with very high-powered and sophisticated drivetrains to meet the acceleration performance requirements with a vehicle that weighs anywhere from 50 to 90,000 pounds. They need to drive fast and overcome difficult terrain and also be agile and sure-footed. In the addition, what makes them very complex is at the flick of a switch, while still driving, they can engage the fire pump and pump and roll in either forward or reverse, and properly mix and proportion foam concentrate and water solution and apply it through various remote controlled nozzles at a very high capacity of 3,000 to 6,000 liters a minute. Of foam solution. So they carry enough foam concentrate, as I mentioned, for 2 tanks of water. These trucks are quite fun to play with and interesting to work. So if you think of your basic big 4-wheel drive farm tractor out in the field, combining or pulling a plow, that is actually how the powertrain operates in the modern fire ARFF truck. Used to be a lot of them had 2 engines, one for pumping and one for driving, but that was obviously takes up space and weight and everything. So they have these extremely sophisticated transmissions that when you turn the pump on, the gas pedal turns into a modulator valve, and it modulates your forward or rearward momentum, keeping a fixed RPM on the engine at the same time so that you have good foam and water pumping performance. It's quite sophisticated. Twin Disc is one of the major builders of these transmissions. I have a little story here about a ARFF truck and engines on ARFF trucks. The old ones had dual engines, and then for many years they would run sort of a straight pipe, no muffler, non-EPA, so no environmental controls on them engines, modified to meet the performance requirements for the airports. I was doing a fire chief show in Quebec City back in the early '90s or mid '90s, and we had an ARFF truck for the show. It was Mirabel Airport's ARFF truck, and so they agreed to let us borrow it for the show. Now, Quebec City, the convention, it's a seaport town. It's on the river. It's quite hilly. We had the crash truck trucked to a unloading area in the port, and then the convention center's on the top of the hill up in the city, and therefore we had to move the crash truck on the road. And so myself and my dealer, I think Denny, you maybe knew Robert Traversy a little bit.
I did.
He's retired, lives on Nuns Island in Montreal. He was driving and I was chasing in the rental car, and it was an early June sunny Sunday morning at about 7 o'clock in the morning. We're climbing the hills of Quebec City with a straight pipe Detroit diesel, like silver 8V92, and the smoke and the noise was deafening, and we disturbed a lot of people. So these things.
Back then, we would have said that was awesome.
I thought we thought it was awesome too.
I have a similar story, but I was in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
It was 3 across, and you drove from the middle, and I drove it through town on Sunday morning for a show and shine. 8V92 silver straight pipe.
Yep, there you go. Same.
What
thing.
a racket! I thought it was gonna fall over. It felt like it.
Yeah. Well, we had to get this truck inside the Quebec City Convention Center, and it was an extremely tight fit. And poor Robert, and he's like 5 foot nothing. He's driving this thing, and it's inches, and we had to do like the 30-point turn just to move every maneuver. It took forever. His arms were so sore after. I don't think he could pick up a glass after we put that truck in there. But anyway, just a little story. Now, due to the emission requirements, these apparatus are running huge 16-cylinder diesel engines with outputs in the 1,000 horsepower range. The newer emission-compliant engines are much heavier and much more complex, which has changed the trucks to need a lot of horsepower to meet the 3-minute rule. In order to meet the 3-minute response time to the under the runways, driver training and testing and skill development is also a critical factor. And this is exactly what was occurring during when this accident happened. They were doing emergency timed training runs. The annals of rolled over airport firefighting crash trucks or ARFF trucks is long. They frequently get rolled over while trying to respond to drills and or crashes. And because they go so fast, and then you got to turn a corner and they're top heavy, and so training the drivers is a key thing. Maneuvering is very tricky, so a critical engineer skill. The ICAO requirements also state that the fire station must be in proximity to the control tower, and minimal turns should be planned for emergency vehicles to reach the main runways, which makes sense. There was only one 90-degree turn required for emergency vehicles to negotiate onto the main runways at Lima, Peru. And you can take it fairly gently because it's a very wide runway, so you don't have to turn sharply like in a downtown area. Due to the new fire station and the runways, the emergency services for the airport had been doing limited emergency or timed emergency response tests called ETRs from both the existing fire station and the new fire station that was located near the new control tower. Over several months for both confirmation of the theoretical design times, they've already figured this out, on paper that it would work, but then they were doing it to prove it and also to train their people and get familiar with the new roadways and those kind of things. During construction, though, there were frequent detours and blocked taxiways or access points, often defined with cones or pylons. At the time of the accident, the new fire station and the control tower were actually not in operation, and they were still under control of the construction contractor.
So of interest, you can actually Google this airport. It's on, go to Google Earth, and you can see the airport. You can see it's still under construction. It says it's 2023 images, but I suspect they're 2022 images. You can see the runway where the incident happened. It's on the right. You can also see the new control tower, and you can see the new fire hall. It's not labeled, but you can see two of these Panthers sitting out on the apron in front of the fire hall. So you can spot it. It's all there on Google Earth, and it's quite interesting. Good. You can see where the incident happened. You can see it's right there.
I've got some pictures and stuff from the report that I'm going to throw on social media when we publish. So have maps and they have. I actually have live footage of these trucks driving out there because everything in the control tower is taped, and they have little icons and show where they are and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting.
It's also interesting to go to the Rosenbauer site and have a look at these Panthers, but they're pretty sophisticated. But I would caution you that this particular one is a 2012, and apparently there was some significant changes in the cab, particularly the visibility for the driver and so forth. So it doesn't mention that that's contributory in this incident, but it might have been where they did not see this airplane coming right at them.
Yeah.
And it seems odd to me that they didn't, but they were turning right and the airplane came from behind them.
Yeah.
So leading up to this, so they had to go through some emergency response training, ETR. They were performed leading up to this. The details were they were all carried out from the old in-service fire station and took place only on taxiways without entering the main runways. And this will, of course, be important. Like everything we mentioned, it's going to be important.
Later. Yep.
So the ETR, February 27th, 2022. I'm just going to fly through this here because they get quite a few exercises with their ARFF units. Rescue 2, Rescue 3, Rescue 1 participated. The rescue supervisor attended the control tower to observe, which is obviously a requirement. The control tower determined the destination and direction of the exercise, and the ARFF units traveled along the taxiways following the direction to the tower controls. So then in April, so that one was in February, next one was in April. Also 3 units, Rescue 3, 2, and 1 participated. There was no evidence that emergency services representatives attended the control tower to observe, which is apparently a requirement. The control tower determined the destination and directed the exercise. The ARFF units traveled along the taxiway following direction to the tower controllers, and 2 of the 3 ARFF vehicles individually requested entry to the taxiways, individually reviewing the instructions, complying with directions to stay off the main runways at all times. And this will be important. It's generally accepted and enforced practice that all vehicles and aircraft must obtain clearance and direction from the surface controller in the control tower before entering any active taxiway and or runway at all times, which kind of makes sense. Next exercise in June, again, Rescue 3, 2, and 1. Rescue personnel attended the control tower to observe this time. The control tower determined the destination and directed the exercise. The ARFF units traveled along the taxiway following directions to the tower, so same as before. 2 of the 3 ARFF vehicles individually requested entry to the taxiway and individually reviewing the instructions. And then is that the last exercise? I think in October. Again, Rescue 2, 3, and 1. The rescue chief this time and the supervisor attended the control tower and observed. The control tower determined the destination and direction of the exercise, and the ARFF units traveled along the taxiway just like they did before. So on August 17th, 2022, there was another ETR performed, this time from the location of the new fire station and onto the main runway. The recorded ETR time was 2 minutes and 48 seconds. There were no official observations of this event. It was just logged. On November 15th, a meeting was held discussing the timeline for opening of the new fire station and runway, scheduled for January 2023. It was decided to perform another ETR on November 17th, 2022. So coordinating of timing of the next ETR was done between the various tower and emergency service personnel via telephone and emails. It was decided to hold the ETR on November 18th between 15 and 1600 hours. An email was sent to the duty staff regarding the ETR with some details indicating it would be from the new station and onto the old, still active runway. The runways run parallel to each other with the new terminal controller and fire station between them. So the rescue supervisor called the tower shift supervisor at 1300 hours to review the planned ETR. This tower person was unaware of the planned ETR, so they reviewed the plans orally and agreed. There was a shift change of tower personnel at 1500 hours, which led to some lack of communication about the planned ETR from where and to where, which route, etc. There were 4 tower controllers on duty at all times, situated in a wide semicircle in the tower, with a supervisor in the rear of the others. So there was a shift supervisor controller, aerodrome controller, surface controller, authorization controller. And just off the record here, this is like it's amazing how these airports work. This air traffic control, all this stuff, and then you throw in some emergency vehicles. It's absolutely mind-boggling. That
Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time. My brother-in-law was a airport firefighter in Saskatoon, so I used to go there, and I actually rode out with them and tried fighting fires with the trucks and stuff like that, and it was fascinating to learn how it all meshes
how that all
together
works. Yeah.
very carefully. Yeah.
So the rescue supervisor called the tower at 15:01 on the radio using call sign Rescue 6, though he was actually in Rescue 7, to request permission to move traffic cones blocking access to the main runway from the new fire station. Approach roadway, which was done. There have been I'm confused just by reading this. There has been some confusion which cones were removed, so they had to move them, right? And that's also something very interesting when you are at the airport. You see all these road markings and where they have to stay. They get those little stanchions and flashing lights. It's quite amazing, and actually amazing that there's not more stuff happening there on a daily basis almost. There were more conversations between the rescue supervisor and the tower, clarifying the plan at 15:07 due to lack of awareness between tower personnel. Some communications were recorded on radio and telephone, but cell phone discussions between rescue and tower personnel were not recorded, causing gaps in the investigation. So it made it hard for going back and see who talked to whom and what was said and agreed on. To add to the confusion, because they were going to respond from the new fire station, therefore they would not be notified or called out on the usual tower to station alarm system. The rescue supervisor would activate the vehicle sirens at the start and at the end of the ETR. The supervisor was in Rescue 7, that's the pickup, last in line of the ETR, with Rescue 3, that was the 4x4 Panther, Rescue 1 following the 6x6 Panther, and Rescue 7, the Nissan pickup, third. According to the photos of the incident, and I think we will post some of these on Facebook and our social media there. According to the photos of the incident, Rescue 3, the smaller 4x4 ARFF, had a significant lead on Rescue 1, the much heavier 6x6 ARFF, and Rescue 1, that traveling supervisor. Rescue 2, 4, 5, and 6 were on the old fire station, not participating in the ETR.
And the point there, Dirk, is that the guy leading it, the supervisor, he was way behind.
He was way behind, and the other guy was way off. Yeah.
If he was radioing for permission, it would have been not at the right time.
Right.
But it didn't happen.
Yeah. So at 15:10, the rescue supervisor activated the siren at Rescue 7 to start the second ETR from the new fire station. This was radio to the tower surface controller. All radio traffic from rescue units was coming from Rescue 7, the last unit in the line of responding apparatus. At 15:10:40, the tower aerodrome controller authorized the LATAM A320N aircraft cleared for takeoff on the main runway. So while this exercise is going, there's still air traffic going, right?
Yep.
At 15:10:52, so 12 seconds later, the surface controller observed through binoculars and informed the rescue supervisor that they were inside of the taxiway. This was incorrect, but the rescue supervisor did not reference or clarify this error. At 15:11:30 seconds, the aircraft captain observed a vehicle moving rapidly from the right onto the main runway. At 15:11:24, which is going back in time, kind of confusing there, it was observed in the post-incident review to tower videos. The aerodrome controller and supervisor were observing the movement of the rescue convoy on the access road until the moment of collision. So at 11:33, the collision occurred as Rescue 3 was leaving the access road and making the turn onto the main runway. Note the new fire station and access road to the runway, besides each other, was quite a distance from the old control tower located across two runways and the old terminal parking ramps and buildings, approximately 1.5 kilometer line of sight. So again, there's some added photos on social media.
And so they couldn't really tell where they were because they were so far away. And it comes out later, the controllers had never visited those areas. They didn't know what the lay of the land looked like.
Which is interesting.
It strikes me odd that the supervisors at the tail end is to me, having your fastest vehicle get to the scene and do even a momentary size up would have benefits, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, for sure.
I think you would lead and then pull.
There are people on the ground. There's active fire. There's a fuel spill here.
Well, you want that command of where to approach, which way to approach,
Yeah,
right?
but he's tail end Charlie behind the slowest guy. Like that just
Makes
I don't understand if that's standard practice or it was just for the ETRs. I'm not sure which. They don't really get into that, do they, Paul?
No, it'd be interesting to find out. I mean, that's what happened in San Francisco, right? The airport crash truck drove over a passenger.
It can happen.
Yeah, because there's no guiding. I mean, typically when you're working in, there's no backing up, no reverse. Like that's typically training for ARFF drivers is you don't back up, you only drive forward. So never put yourself in a place where you have to back up because you can't see behind you.
But here you're driving into the middle of a crowd, literally. If
Yeah.
everything's going properly, they've
Yes.
disembarked. You're driving into the middle of a crowd.
Right.
Okay, so the aircraft was weighing 61,642 kilograms and it was traveling at a speed of 243 kilometers per hour when the impact occurred. Rescue 3 was traveling at 72 kilometers an hour. The other rescue units were traveling at approximately 64 kilometers an hour, so quite a bit slower. The pilots of this plane and other immediately contacted the tower to inform them of the collision and fire. Control tower activated the crash alarm. Rescue 2 and 3, which were in the old fire station, responding immediately to the burning aircraft. The local municipal fire department was also notified. The fire was contained by 15:15. Just trying to go back for the timing here. So
It was
within
like 3 minutes. Yeah.
3.5 minutes, it was contained. The evacuation and treatment of the passengers was beginning. Rescue 4 was directed to the burning aircraft, and Rescue 5 and Rescue 7 attended the scene of the collision to treat the firefighters in Rescue 3. 2 firefighters showed signs of immediate death, and the remaining firefighter suffered serious traumatic injury. He was extricated and transported to a hospital. So it went all pretty fast, right? They took the turn, and they're right in the way there.
Yeah, and I mean, 60-some thousand pounds at 240 kilometers per hour into a truck. I mean, and it hit the engine. It ripped the engine right off the plane. We'll put some pictures in the social media feeds, but it was a terrific impact.
So we're going to look a little bit at ICAO provisions, basically regulations, and these are really directed at how traffic moves around on an airport, which of course is fundamentally what happened here. So drivers of vehicles that are operating or intend to operate in the maneuvering area. So the maneuvering area is a term that comes up quite often, but I guess this is areas where aircraft could be. So taxiways, runways, that kind of things.
Yep.
Ramps, yeah. Hard pans. Anyway, should intending to operate in the maneuvering area must refer to the air traffic control for the safety-related parts, must refer to air traffic control for the safety-related parts of the instructions transmitted by voice. So that's a kind of a garbled translation there, but basically what they're required to do is they're required to confirm with air traffic control what the safety instructions are. And so instructions like, I wish to enter, you might be told where to enter, you have permission, you must hold at a certain distance, crossing or operating on, you're allowed to cross or operate on any operational runway or taxiway. So the surface controller basically provides permission to the driver of these vehicles to be in the places they're going to be. And I guess the the thinking there is that without that permission, you shouldn't be there, and they don't think you are. So the traffic control at the aerodrome, which is the airport, traffic in the maneuvering area, the movement of pedestrians and vehicles in the maneuvering area will be subject to authorization from the control tower. So personnel, including the drivers of all vehicles, are required to obtain clearance from the control tower before entering any of these maneuvering areas. Even if such authorization exists, like pre-exists, entry into the runway or runway strip or any change in plans, I guess, or direction of your authorized operation will be subject to a specific reauthorization from the control tower. So if you're driving up and you're going on a certain taxiway and you suddenly decide, no, I need to go down another direction, you need to communicate that request for a change permission. So if you don't have permission, so you can see where there might be some delays. And when you're at airports and you're in the aircraft, you often see vehicles traveling and then stopping in the middle of nowhere, and you're sitting, what's he doing? Counting the birds? No, he's waiting for permission
to cross or to move.
Yeah, or proceed or whatever.
But I remember this right from when I started out as a medic in '82. We would go up to the airport and get people off the airplanes or air ambulances or whatever. And we were always taught that you can't go on the apron without permission. We didn't have a radio to the tower, so there was always an escort vehicle. And they said, I don't care what happens, you never, ever, ever, ever go on the airport without your escort. Even if it's a plane crash, you wait for an escort.
Yeah, bad things can happen.
Yeah.
So when the rescue vehicles left the fire station and enter into these areas where the aircraft are, maneuvering areas, they pass into the jurisdiction of the air traffic control tower, the surface controller. These vehicles must carry radio communications equipment that's two-way communications, and through which all of their movements can be constantly subject to the orders of the air traffic control tower. So fundamentally, that's what we're just talking about.
And I remember going to the airport working with my brother-in-law, riding along with them as they went and did training. And every time they moved, they were on the radio going, red 52 tower, we want to cross this taxiway or this runway or whatever. Yep, granted, or hold here or whatever. I mean, it was just general practice. But we see in the operations here, when we recited those 3 or 4 exercises, that not all the trucks were calling in. Sometimes they weren't at all, or only one would call in for the other 2. So it's really odd that this was happening.
Right. But it goes back to Dirk's comment earlier. It says, imagine being in the control tower and keeping track of all of these things going on at once. And but you'll also notice they work 2-hour shifts, right? Mm-hmm, so it's got to be mentally exhausting. But they have these, methods of keeping,
They actually teach air traffic control in Edmonton, I think, at Grant McEwen or something. And one of my firefighter friends' son is an air traffic controller. He took the training. And it's one of my favorite video games that I play online on the computer sometimes is air traffic control.
Yeah. Not everybody makes the grade.
I was just going to say, it's a tough test. Like, it's tough to get in. Yeah, you have to be very analytic and well organized. And
well, oopsies
not
have
a scalar brain, that's for sure. It's like on the phone.
Oopsies have consequences.
Oh, yeah. Deadly consequences, absolutely.
Findings from the investigation. So it kind of goes in 2 parts. First part is sort of findings that they found, and then the last part is the conclusions. And we'll just kind of rip through these here. But the incoming rescue supervisor did not receive information about the programming of this second ETR from his general tower coordinator or the regular supervisor. So that remember they had a shift change, and they didn't get informed this was going to happen. The shift supervisor controller, so that's the head controller on duty, did not adequately supervise that the personnel on duty were properly informed and prepared to direct from the new station, which the controllers didn't even. I mean, they knew where it was, but they had no idea the lay of the land over there.
And that's a surprising thing, because the first one was like they did the old, and then when it really comes down to it, now this is the new station. Half of the guys didn't even know what was going on.
But if you go back and look at the timeline, I think the exercise commenced 1 minute into the shift change.
Yeah.
So you really didn't give the guy much time to say, hang on a second while I look this up.
Right.
Like it was like, okay, I've just sat down, my teacup's nice and warm, and What? There's an exercise?
who, who, where? New fire station, where is that again? 2 kilometers away.
But
Yeah.
then on the other hand, when you think about it, I mean, the thing is, it's a live airport. There's like planes going, but on the other hand, do you have to be prepared for an exercise to make it more realistic?
Well, yeah, that's always the question, right? Is it's an exercise, which is fine, and it would have been fine if they would have radioed in and said, "Hey, Rescue 3, we're going onto the runway," and then people would have went, "Whoa, what? Hang on a minute, I just told the
So
plane to go."
yeah, so it
Yeah,
wasn't so much the tower personnel that screwed up. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
It was the guys in the trucks that didn't let them know that this is going
Yeah,
on.
but don't forget, they said we'd like to remove those nice traffic cones that allow us to get onto the runway, please. Yes, sure, no problem. Uh,
they didn't know where the cones really were, and they addressed this in the conclusions a little later. Adequate supervision they talk about. Then the rescue team supervisor, who had not participated in the initial meeting where the ETR was authorized, was tasked by the general rescue supervisor, so the head guy in the pickup, to communicate with the tower to coordinate the best time slot to execute the exercise. Didn't happen, right? It was just like, tell us when we can go, and that was missed. Just before 2 o'clock, they talked on the phone with the intention of coordinating the most appropriate time slot. However, the communication turned out to be both limited and imprecise. Apparently, he was not clear about the general concept of the exercise, and this is reflected in the answers he gave to the controller shift supervisor, who could not clearly grasp what was going on. I've read the phone log, and I can't make it out either. Like they talked, "Hi mate, how you doing?" It was very casual. "How you doing today?" All that kind of stuff. But then when the critical information came, there was a misunderstanding, and they didn't seem to dig into that misunderstanding. It was kind of unique. They generated basically an erroneous interpretation of what was going to happen. They attributed this to an overconfidence of the shift supervisor controller prevented him from evaluating the possible dangers that could arise, evidencing that he had a complacent attitude towards the situation. And you do get that a little bit with the controllers because they're busy doing their job. They're busy getting people out, getting people in, and then the pesky rescue guys who, we do have a bit of a reputation for being prima donnas, where, we got stripes and shoulder flashes and flashing lights and stuff. And so it sometimes there is a bit of an annoyance factor between controllers and emergency services, because it's never going to happen. We don't need you anyway. You can't do anything, and you're just bugging us. So I've experienced this in airports.
Which is horrible. It
Is.
shouldn't.
It is.
That's the place where it shouldn't happen, right?
Just like firefighters and an alarm call. Here we go, another alarm call. Right?
Yeah, well, that's number 5 here, right? So we talk about the coordination at the tower was lacking. Attitude reflect a marked overconfidence in prior planning. But again, that was the old one. It sounded like the old system worked well because they've been practicing it for so long, right? And so the thing is, like, the prior planning was overconfidence, and which could be described as a state of complacency on part of the emergency service staff. And that's what you said, Paul. It's kind of like they want to do their stuff, and we come in there, brr, yeah, we know what we're doing, right? And well, obviously they screwed that one up.
so there was also problems in the control tower too. So the controller supervisor, the shift supervisor at the control tower, he understood that they call this the convoy rescue vehicles, but there's really the 3 vehicles, right? So the rescue vehicles would begin its movement from the new fire station, which is near the new control tower, not near the existing control tower that was currently being used. It was, I think you said, what, 1.5 kilometers away, Paul?
Yeah.
A considerable distance. So you try and see what a vehicle is doing from 1.5 kilometers away. Good luck for you. And you'll see from the photographs that it's not perfectly flat there. There's always some curvature, right? They would be moving through the various taxiways until they reached the main runway. So this is the shift supervisor's understanding. According to his understanding, drivers would then request authorization to enter the flight runway, and this authorization would be granted but only if air traffic permitted it at the time. Obviously, you don't get on the runway where there's active aircraft landing or taking off. He transmitted this poor perception of the exercise to his staff on ship. So clearly, staff, there's going to be an exercise. It's going to happen. When they get to these points, they'll let us know if they need permission or not, and if it's clear, let them go.
Yep.
I'm paraphrasing here, but
no, absolutely, that's absolutely right. And I paraphrased a bunch of the stuff from the report
that's
too.
a
So
slightly different concept from the rescue guys.
yeah,
Clearly.
at the time of the exercise, some of the aircraft taxiways were still blocked by fencing that restricted the circulation of vehicles and personnel towards the primary taxiways and the main runway. They delimited the construction area of the airport maneuvering area from new to old. The only route available to access the main runway, the main taxiway or runway, was through what they call Vehicle Service Road 4. It was a vehicle access road, and that was from the new fire station to get to the taxiway, where the convoy was supposed to travel. It did not have a direct paved connection with the runway, but nobody knew that. The air traffic controllers were unaware of how they were coming because of that lack of planning, pre-planning beforehand, and just general knowledge. And the expectation that, well, when they got close, they would call in on the radio, right?
So clearly nobody did a dry run on this.
This was the dry run.
Yeah, but I meant a slow speed dry run.
And the next point along the same lines is just a lack of communication or miscommunication. So the shift supervisor controller received a call from the general rescue supervisor through his cell phone, which was not recorded because the communication was made between cell phones and was not recorded was not recorded in the records of the tower. So the tower doesn't know that these two guys are talking to each other. According to the regulations, all communication with the tower must be made through a landline or cell phone connected to the tower. In this case, the shift supervisor controller should have ensured that the proper procedure was followed, and it wasn't. So the tower didn't know what these two guys were talking about.
This was sort of a factor in the Shirley Towers incident in the UK, where the 2 firefighters died. There was several transfers of commands and on-scene arrivals and stuff that were done via cell phones. The chiefs and stuff were phoning dispatch on their cell phone because they couldn't get through on the radio because they had just changed systems or something. But it led to the failure of the transfer of command and also the awareness. The other guys don't know what's going on because you're talking privately. Whereas if it's on the radio, everybody knows what's happening.
And it's not logged into CAD unless
right.
the CAD operator decides to type something in and maybe paraphrases something. So it's not recorded on your voice.
And nobody can intervene. Like if you hear something that's not right, you would say something. But if you don't even hear it, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Right? But as we've heard previously, even when stuff was in error, the supervisor in Rescue 7 didn't intervene anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly was focused on something else. So the rescue supervisor summoned the firefighters. So they had a meeting before they went into this exercise, and he informed them, amongst other things, that what the convoy's travel route would be. Specifically, he indicated that they'd be leaving from the new fire hall, and they would head through this vehicle service road for access to the taxiways and then continue towards the main runway. So if you look at the plans of this, it looks like this going through VSR 4 was a bit of a detour. Anyway, so that's the plan, and that's what they were going to follow. So the firefighters knew what they were going to be doing.
Yeah, and the big difference here is that were they going on the runway, and that was never very clear, to many of the people, because most of the previous ETRs didn't go on the runway. They just followed the taxiway down to the end of the runway. Yeah, you still need permission on a taxiway, but the consequences are not as severe as being on the runway.
I would say the risk is lower.
Yeah, the risk is a lot lower. Yep, you're right. The airport aircraft firefighter who was driving the second rescue vehicle, Rescue 1, that participated in this second ETR, expressed that...
That's the 6x6.
Yeah, the 6x6, right. Expressed during his interview after the incident that in his perception, the authorization to enter the flight runway was granted and coordinated with the tower by the General Rescue Supervisor, just as it was done during the first ETR from the new fire hall.
Yeah, and the shift supervisor controller and the controllers of the outgoing shift from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. did not provide any information about the scheduling of the second ETR with the controllers of the oncoming shift. So there's a lack of communication right there.
So the rescue supervisor contacted the surface controller. So this is the guy in the control tower who coordinates surface traffic. And this contact came at 15:03:52, so almost 15:04 hours. That's 4 minutes into the shift, to request authorization to remove traffic cones in order for them to carry out this exercise. So the traffic cones were up, obviously, to provide a warning to vehicles who were going to cross whatever point they were at. And without specifically indicating where these cones were on the ground, the surface controller asked him on 2 occasions to indicate his location and never clearly received a reference from the rescue supervisor.
Yeah, and the phone log shows it, and it's like he did never get the answer, but he didn't pursue it either. It's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, he's busy, man.
We got work to do. And there was evidence, it doesn't come up, we don't talk about it here. There was lots of evidence of overwork and overtime shifts and not enough staffing and stuff like that was going on. The surface controller managed to locate the General Rescue Supervisor through the use of his binoculars and granted him authorization to approach to a distance of 90 meters from the runway access, the center of the runway, and remove the safety cones. However, he was not aware, due to ignorance of the programming of the second ETR, which, by allowing the removal of the safety cones, was then opening access to the main runway. This condition reflected a state of overconfidence of the surface controller, which would have originated from overconfidence, resulting in a decrease of his situational awareness. That's the good old Dr. Rich Gassaway, situational awareness, and how that, especially in times of stress and high stress jobs, that's why he's going all over the country teaching situational awareness to operators and firefighters. And
so obviously the controller never imagined that they'd drive out onto the runway without permission.
Right. Well,
That's exactly.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the next point too. The shift supervisor controller, minutes before the second ETR began, informed the surface and aerodrome controllers that the convoy would go from the new fire station to the waiting point on the taxiway, located near the end of the runway 34. In addition, he stressed to the surface controller the importance of instructing the convoy to stay off the runway as a precaution. And then, depending on the existing traffic, the authorization would be given or granted to enter the runway. So they were supposed to stop. And as you said, Denise, like you see these cars in the middle of nowhere just suddenly stopping for no reason, but everybody has a reason there. So they should have just stopped and wait for clearance.
Right. So the rescue supervisor began the exercise at 3:10 p.m. Again, 10 minutes into the shift, by activating the siren on his vehicle, which was what they were going to use because the new station didn't have all its alarm systems set up, and communicated via the surface frequency on his radio that there was a fire at the end of runway 34, obviously training fire at the end of runway 34, which is the active runway. Then he proceeded to move the rescue convoy without requesting the tower for express authorization to enter the flight runway. As was stipulated, he was required to do by regulations and by the airport procedure manuals.
The surface controller, upon realizing the location of the rescue convoy, did not follow the protocol established in the airport regulations for the initial authorization, which indicated communicating. Furthermore, he did not request the General Rescue Supervisor to comply with said instructions. So they saw them moving, but because of the unawareness maybe of where they were and early in the shift, they didn't call them up and say, hey, where are you guys going? They just assumed it was all kosher.
Yeah, and then the access road that VSR 4, where the convoy of rescue vehicles moved during the second ETR, was not mentioned in any of the radio communications made by the rescue coordinating personnel. So again, nobody knew where they were and what they were doing.
So to compound everything that's happened up until now, Authorization to enter onto the active flight runway was never requested by the rescue personnel and was not authorized by the control tower, either before or during the exercise.
So nearing the end of these findings here, the absence of any joint planning between emergency services and tower controllers for the execution of this second ETR was observed. There's a lack of coordination prevented by the early identification of possible risks and their proper management before carrying out the exercise.
You got to think things have changed since then.
Yeah, well,
I hope.
hopefully. Here's another point that's mind-boggling. The training program for rescue personnel has some deficiencies since it does not include the teaching of fundamental courses such as prevention of runaway incursions, procedures for executing ETR, communication with flight controllers. So like all the standardized stuff wasn't taught to them. It was all left up to the supervisor, right?
Yep.
So the individual driver couldn't even make a decision because they didn't know what was going on, and they weren't familiar with the new airport infrastructure either. So
This is there's another podcast that's called Disastrous History, and they look at various big events. It's quite good, and they did one on the BP Horizon rig fire and oil spill and stuff. And BP, all the organizations that were working on the platform was a lack of training and exercises. And it's the same stuff here. It was all on the job, me see you do kind of training, and that's why they didn't shut the rig down. They didn't activate the emergency system. They didn't activate the alarm system. Some people were afraid to. It's like, oh no, we're never supposed to touch that, right? And it's just a lack of training, and it's the same thing we see here.
Yeah. So this, just to remind our listeners, this happened in November 2022, a year ago.
Yeah.
Hello.
At a civilized, large metropolitan airport,
Yeah,
right?
with
The
a
largest
with a
airport
career
in South America.
career staff.
yeah, there's you gotta wonder like there's still a first, second, third world, but for air traffic, you think all these international rules and regulations and the common language and all this stuff that this should not happen. But then again, it's a construction phase, right? And then they're phasing from the old to the new.
Yeah.
All these factors. But anytime we see multiple firefighter fatalities, usually it's a communication / leadership command issue. And it just over and over. If more than one person, oftentimes when one person is killed, but definitely we see multiples. It's usually a comedy of errors.
But how many times in fatal incidents is communication, or I should say more properly, lack of effective communication, either the number one, number two, number three fundamental underlying cause? It's always at the top of the list. Always.
I like this last one here.
Yeah. So the finding number 21, and this astounds me also, but keep in mind these were older vehicles. It was found that rescue vehicles R1 and R3, which were both Panther vehicles. Mm-hmm. So one was a 4x4, one was a 6x6. So Rescue 3 was the one involved. That were part of this exercise had basic lighting systems that limited their visibility for view from the control tower. So I guess by basic lighting systems, they're referring to just standard fire department type vehicle. So not ones that, have a, an up and down and side to side like you see in aircraft, warning lights on vehicles. And so for observation from the tower at the service road intersection, when they were observing the vehicles tended to blend in with the surrounding topography. And it made it difficult to detect the vehicles that were in transit on the road.
Yeah, so fire truck.
So visibility from the old tower wasn't good, is what they're saying. And the lighting systems didn't contribute to visibility.
So they should have moved to the new tower and run the exercise from there.
Right. But clearly they were used to operating on a much smaller footprint, and it probably wasn't a big issue then. But now suddenly this airport went from, how much bigger was it, Paul? Like 10 times the size?
8 times, 9 million to 2 million to 9 million.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like vastly larger.
Hmm.
And certain things obviously weren't keeping up.
And emergency lighting in other countries, I mean, even in Europe, if you compare emergency lighting in Europe to emergency lighting in North
Yeah,
America, there's a
not the
vast
same.
difference. Europe
Yeah,
is adding a lot more lights in the last
yeah,
10 years or so.
yeah.
But and in North America, maybe we have too many lights.
Yeah, I'd
But
say.
if you just bought the basic international crash truck package, it probably had like 4 beacons on there, one
Yeah,
in each corner,
yeah.
and
About this big.
yeah, just a few inches. And 2012, just when LEDs were starting to really get going, so they might have been strobes. So yeah.
The message here is the guys in the tower only had a vague idea of where these guys were
Yep,
and what they were
yep.
doing.
The contributing factors, we'll just breeze through these here. A briefing meeting was not held after the first ETR from the new station between emergency services and the controllers to determine any errors or deficiencies or discrepancies, missing errors, the probable cause and contributing factors, procedures in the development of the exercise. So poor planning basically allowed analysis and provision of improvement actions, which didn't happen before the second ETR. Number 2, the acceptance without observations by controllers of the rescue proposal to carry out the ETR from partially implemented facilities in the testing phase located in new areas of the airport, which had not yet been officially handed over to the airport control, was a contributing factor. There was no meetings between emergency services and tower personnel for the identification of hazards, risk management, and mitigation actions inherent to programming and execution of ETRs from the new areas and facilities of the airport. And I get that. I mean, I don't know how many times, the new area of town or the new piece of equipment, let's go try it out. The training in Texas, we haven't done that one yet, where the aerial ladder, they were training on a building and the platform, and they caught the edge of the building with the platform when they were going to descend, and ended up a brick on the crown molding on the building failed. That's where the aerial was caught. Then the aerial bounced back, and 2 people were ejected from the platform, maybe all 4, and were killed. No safety belts and a high risk training maneuver because, hey, we got a new truck. And why no safety belts? Because they were still on the old truck because it was in service. So we fall into this trap of, hey, let's try out the new thing before we learn how to operate it. It's definitely a guy thing. Hey, I can do this. Here, watch. No meetings. Not having a joint meeting between emergency services to plan it would have allowed participating personnel to know more clearly the concepts and the details. And of course, as Denny mentioned before, failure to provide adequate training to emergency personnel to familiarize them with the location, designation, and operational functioning of new taxiways and routes. Incorrect application of the principles of aeronautical communication. This one blows me away because that's always standard. You always do it. So how come these firefighters at this airport haven't been doing that? That was a question, is why aren't they calling in to get onto a runway or a taxiway? They didn't notice, of course, that when they removed the cones, the only route access was being released into direct travel on the runway. Just kind of scanning over these here. And it was 2 minutes before its execution, they learned about it. It's like, okay, we're doing this. And I think you guys talked about that. So these were all the factors that were contributing to this triple fatality. Not only that, 22 people from the plane ended up in hospital, and the panic and their lives are forever changed by having to jump out of a burning plane because of the lack of coordination of people that we assume are responsible for it.
Not to mention the pilots.
Yeah.
Basically killed the 3 firefighters, right? Then you got to live with that. Even though, I mean, it was not their fault, but they're dealing with trying to save the airplane, save the passengers, save the crew, and kill 3 firefighters. So that's kind of...
Well, the pilots are really the heroes here. They managed to recover a plane that was doing, what'd they say, 240 kilometers an hour.
Yep.
And they must have been pretty close to the no-go point.
They were I mean, all of a sudden they see this fire truck. Can you imagine the
3
feeling
seconds
of,
they had.
yeah, if seeing this and they're like, oh, I can't do anything about it,
Yeah, he's
right?
not going to, is he? Yes, he did.
Right.
Oh my God, what now?
Yeah, yeah, and then to live with that laughter is that I can't do anything about to stop this. What is happening? Remember, one of our uncles, Denny. I don't know if you ever talked to them. Uh, uh, um, not Harry. Harry, who was a train engineer.
Yep,
And not Harry, but Johnny was, and
yep.
Johnny's uncle was, and I remember them as a kid talking about driving the train from Montreal to Toronto. They had a bullet train for a while or something, and they talked about how many people and cows and stuff they killed, and they said it was just the worst feeling in the world. You see this, whatever on the tracks, and you can do absolutely nothing about it. You can stop, but it's a mile down the road, and then having to live with that was terrible.
Well, I tow a travel trailer, and sometimes I see Honda Civics do completely dumb things in front of me, and I just look at them and I go, "Listen, bud, there's no way
Yeah,
I can do anything about it."
one of my good friends I coffee with every few weeks, and he's a truck driver. He hauls propane or butane, and he just shakes his head and goes like, "Sorry, there's nothing I can do. I'm keeping this thing upright and on the road."
Yeah, wave as you go under.
Yeah, ouch.
Edit that out.
Yeah, good stuff, you guys. Thanks again for listening to another emergency traffic podcast. We do appreciate your interest and hope that you find these interesting and informative. Give us a star, a thumbs, or a thumbs up on whatever app you use. Also, you can follow us on Twitter, Podcast Traffic, or Facebook page, the Emergency Traffic Podcast, and we'll post some pictures and layouts and stuff on both those social feeds when we release this podcast. Thanks.
Stay safe.
Stay safe for sure, and don't be complacent.
Yes. What was it? The NYPD Blue and the sergeant in the briefing every morning. He would, be safe out there or something.
Be safe out there.